Welcome to the Full Moon Film Buff, episode 154. We're going to talk about Bloodz versus Wolvez from 2006. I watched this on Plex. I had not seen this before. As always, we start with the prominent crew and cast. You can always find links to a more complete credit list in the show notes. This film was written and directed by Zachary Snig, billed as Z. Winston Brown, with special effects makeup by Carlotta Montealegre. Now, Zachary Snig is a hard filmmaker to pin down. He is a writer, director, producer, and actor. It seems he did a lot of work under three different names: Z. Winston Brown, Zachary Snig, and John Bacchus. He's listed in IMDb as Zachary Snig, so that's the name I'm going to use here. He owns the Purgatory Blues production company, and as a general rule, when he does more traditional work, he uses the Z. Winston Brown name. Zachary Snig is the name he uses for his horror films, and when he does softcore porn, he uses the name John Bacchus. This is Carlotta Montealegre's only film credit. The cast includes Malik Burke as Lupe Garou, Richard Carroll Jr. as Asamon, Jenica Garcia as Dampira, Ian A. Lawrence as Cujo, and Candace Marie as Jamila. The entire cast is entirely regular players for Purgatory Blues. Blood vs. Wolvez is the third bad movie with intriguing themes in a row. How long will this streak continue, I wonder? It's a fascinating cultural artifact blending urban gang drama with supernatural horror, but it suffers from budget constraints, inconsistent acting, and a muddled plot. I don't recommend it. But a few ultra-dedicated genre completionists will find enough interesting elements, particularly in how it merges werewolf mythology with gang culture metaphors, to make it worthwhile to watch. So, the synopsis. The voiceover tells us that there has been a war going on between the vampires, called the Bloodz, and the werewolves, called the, wait for it, Wolvez. The Bloodz dress in suits and are coded as lawyers and property developers. The Wolvez dress like gang members. Confusingly, the Wolvez wear both red and blue bandanas. The head vampire and werewolf, Asamon and Lupe Garou, respectively, negotiated truce where the vampires give the werewolves housing and jobs in exchange for peace. The thing is, they didn't coordinate any of this with their crews. Neither gang wants peace. The werewolves sabotage the vampires' business deals, and some vampires, led by Asamon's personal assistant Dampira, stage a hit on Lupe. He naturally calls off the truce. Asamon worries that he's lost control of his subordinates. The two lead actors share what is easily the best scene in the movie. They meet in a club that Asamon owns and honestly open up about what drives them. Asamon was a slave before he became a vampire, and he's obsessed with control. Lupe admits that he's jealous that his lycanthropy means he can never have the self-control to succeed. He knows his gang doesn't care enough to even try. A racist asshole makes an assumption about Asamon based purely on skin color, so Asamon kills him. The pair agree to try again. The wolf takes a shit on the floor of an apartment. What? Okay. Dampira is having an affair with Asamon's wife, Princess Jamila, right under his nose. Asamon buys the wolves a nightclub for them to run. Dampira leads another hit on the nightclub, this time killing Cujo, Lupe's best friend and maybe his brother, but they could just have been speaking metaphorically. The wolves respond by going on the offensive. They rob Asamon's bank and lace the vampire's blood supplies with garlic. Asamon is forced to turn to the other vampire clans for financial investment. He accidentally ends up poisoning the other vampire leaders with the tainted blood. Asamon officially declares war, which Lupe finds funny since he's already at war. Well, and they've both been at war for centuries. Both sides gear up. There is a very underwhelming battle at a local bar. Lupe barely escapes with his life. Dampira chooses this very moment to attempt a coup on Asamon. She wastes all her bullets, and Asamon ends up staking her with a toilet plunger. When you come at the king, you best not miss. She lets slip about the affair, so Asamon heads home and kills Jamila. There is a final battle at the empty nightclub. In the end, and surprising no one, it's Asamon versus Lupe. They kill each other. Oh, goodness. The werewolf transformation effects are the most underwhelming I can remember. They set a new low bar. For most of the film, the wolves do nothing more than manifest fangs that are impossible to distinguish from the vampire's fangs. The only way to tell the two gangs apart is their dress codes. The wolves do transform once under the full moon. They convulse on the floor a bit before their fingernails turn into claws. That's it. Fangs and claws. Nobody changes. No hair, no fur, nothing. I was shocked at how little effort was put into this. And unfortunately, Bloodz versus Wolves spends almost no time developing its intriguing werewolf mythology, which is a significant missed opportunity. The film provides only the basic details. Lycanthropy transmission remains unexplained. The full moon influences transformations, we know that, and silver does prove effective as a weapon. However, the movie does offer one intriguing twist on that silver mythology. It hints that the werewolves became street level gang members precisely because their vulnerability to precious metals prevented them from accumulating wealth, and consequently from developing the financial skills that come with managing money. Now, this is a fascinating concept that deserved much deeper exploration. It doesn't get it. Another undeveloped element appears in a single line of dismissive dialogue, the suggestion that the wolves mark their territory. Now, this reference could have bridged the gap between animal behavior and urban gang culture, connecting how real wolves and dogs use scent markers to claim territory and how gangs employ graffiti for the same purpose. Instead of exploring this rich parallel between lycanthropic instincts and street level power dynamics, the film just tosses out the concept as an insult and moves on. Both ideas represented compelling ways that this movie could have merged werewolf lore with contemporary urban realities, making the supernatural premise feel more grounded and socially relevant. It's a real shame. Now, the film does attempt to explore themes of economic inequality and social mobility through its supernatural gang warfare, though it does so with considerably less sophistication than its higher budget predecessor Underworld. While both films establish vampires as the moneyed elite and werewolves as the economically disadvantaged, Bloodz versus Wolves relocates this class conflict from Gothic aristocracy to urban street gangs. There was potential here, but it ended up creating a more contemporary but ultimately less effective examination of wealth and power. Vampires occupy positions of financial dominance, while werewolves struggle in poverty. However, where Underworld portrayed werewolves as a working class faction with some organizational structure, Bloodz versus Wolves reduces them to street level gang members. This shift from the working class to the criminal class fundamentally alters the moral framework of the conflict. The wolves are not economically disadvantaged. They exist outside legitimate economic structures entirely, operating in an underground economy of violence and territorial control. Now, Asamon's proposed solution, providing the werewolves with financial resources to uplift them, represents the film's most direct engagement with questions of economic mobility and social reform. The suggestion acknowledges the centuries-long conflict might be resolved through wealth redistribution rather than continued violence. Yet the film immediately undermines this premise by suggesting lycanthropes' feral nature makes them inherently uncivilized, implying that their poverty stems not from a systematic inequality or even from bad choices, but from fundamental character defects. This narrative choice reveals the film's troubling ideological underpinnings. Whether intentionally or not, Bloodz versus Wolves appear to argue that certain populations lack the self-control to be productive members of society. By linking lycanthropy with gang membership, and both with an essential inability to handle wealth responsibly, the film transforms what could have been a critique of economic inequality into a justification for it. The werewolf's supernatural condition becomes a metaphor for behavioral pathologies that prevent social mobility. The film's limited budget exacerbates these thematic problems by making the conflict feel smaller and more contained than Underworld's warring armies. Rather than suggesting systematic changes or large-scale social transformations, Bloodz versus Wolves presents what feels like localized gang warfare, violence affecting a few city blocks rather than entire social orders. This scale reduction reinforces the notion that the wolves' problems are individual and community-based rather than structural and societal. Ultimately, Bloodz versus Wolves squanders a great opportunity to meaningfully examine money and power. Instead of critiquing systems that do create and maintain economic inequalities, the film suggests that some groups are simply incapable of handling wealth and power responsibly, not by bad choices, but just because of who and what they are. What begins as a premise about economic uplift evolves into a narrative that reinforces stereotypes about urban poverty and criminal behavior. The supernatural elements, rather than providing metaphorical distance for social commentary, become vehicles for essentialist arguments about who deserves economic success and why some communities are doomed to remain trapped in cycles of violence and poverty. Something else it does better is talk about the price of control. This film presents a study in contrasting leadership styles through its supernatural gang leaders, revealing how different approaches to authority affect follower loyalty and ultimately determine a leader's fate. While both Asimon and Loop face challenges maintaining control over their respective factions, their methods and the consequences differ dramatically. Loop's leadership challenges stem from inertia rather than rebellion. His werewolf pack desires continuity, preferring the easy path that they've been on to any dramatic changes in strategy or territory. This represents a relatively manageable leadership problem. Followers who resist change but remain fundamentally loyal to the established hierarchy. Loop's wolves may lack ambition or initiative, but they don't actively undermine his authority. Their resistance is passive, rooted in comfort with familiar patterns rather than genuine dissatisfaction with his leadership style. Asimon faces a far more dangerous situation. His vampire coven actively chafe under his authoritarianism. This ongoing friction threatens the foundations of his power. Unlike Loop's pack, which seeks stability, Asimon's followers experience his leadership as oppressive constraint, rather than protective guidance. The vampire's rebellion isn't about maintaining the status quo, nope. It's about escaping what they perceive as tyrannical oversight. The crucial difference lies in self-awareness and adaptability. Asimon demonstrates a fatal blind spot that prevents him from adjusting his approach. His inability to recognize the connection between his controlling behavior and his followers' growing rebellion reveals a leader trapped by his rigid thinking. Where effective leadership might require flexible and responsiveness to the follower needs, Asimon doubles down on control, creating a vicious cycle where increased authoritarianism breeds increased resistance. The consequences of this leadership failure cascade through every aspect of his life. He loses his wife to the same controlling behavior that alienates his followers, suggesting that his authoritarian tendencies poison both professional and personal relationships. His leadership crumbles as his vampire coven abandons or actively opposes him, leaving him isolated and vulnerable. Finally, these losses culminate in his death, the ultimate price for his inability to inspire genuine loyalty rather than fearful compliance. The film suggests that true loyalty can't be commanded through strict control, but must be earned through leadership that balances authority with respect for followers' autonomy. Asimon's tragedy lies not in facing challenging circumstances. Loop deals with similar issues, but in his fundamental misunderstanding of what motivates lasting allegiance. He thinks they're going to follow him because they have to. By treating his followers as vassals to be controlled rather than allies to be led, he transforms what were supporters into eventual enemies. So, if you like lycanthropes, like, share, and subscribe. Contribute your thoughts and additional observations in the comments below. Let me know what I missed or what you noticed. Next, I plan on discussing Red Riding Hood from 2006. Keep your eye on the moon, a silver bullet in the chamber, and we'll see you back next episode.